just around the corner. Paul, you sent a text to Craig and also to me, the story by John Canzano, who covers the Pac-12. And the story is Pac-12 expansion scenarios getting real. Plus, is Big Ten having buyer's remorse? Now, there's a lot of that that's brought up and then also the nixed in the article as well. For example, he even brings up the Big 12 and the possibility of adding teams to the Big 12 and says, I don't think that's going to happen. But one of the quotes that he put in the article was about one of the teams an AD in the Pac-12 would like to see, if, in fact, it ever gets to that point, which, of course, would be really hard because of the Big 12 and how that conference would dissolve. Or can dissolve.
Well, yeah, and it can only dissolve after the Pac-12 would have done their new TV deal. So how can you really negotiate? All those different things that they'd have to plan out. Plus, but the team that the unnamed AD said was Oklahoma State, which I'm wondering if that AD is from Washington State or Oregon State, because it would seem to me that given the opportunity, the ADs and the rest of the Pac-12 conference, unless pushed into the corner, wouldn't deign to bring a school like Oklahoma State in or any of the schools from the Big 12. And look, the two conferences, I think, kicked the tires on, what a merger would look like, and both walked away uninterested for their own reasons. But I just do think it's funny that all of a sudden now that the tide is turning, that all of a sudden there's, unnamed AD saying that there are schools in the Big 12 that are attractive to them, which to me, and they, we're going to expand, we're going to be fine. They're, ESPN doesn't want to upset the apple cart anymore based on Burke Magnus's interview, but there's still nothing that the Big Ten has done to lead me to believe that they're not at least coming after two of those schools in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly. I mean, there hadn't been much traction on that outside of just the typical realignment circles. And the problem that I find with realignment sometimes on social media is there is far too much talk for what's actually taking place. Like, there's not an update every day going on this. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a need to know published, like, hey, this is what's happening. At least I don't feel that there is. I mean, yeah, I think that there are things that are probably flying hot and heavy behind the scenes and conversations and but as far as like actual movement goes, I don't think it's a daily thing where it's like, oh, and now this has changed and now this has turned. That just seems very wobbly to me.
There seemed to be that possibility after the USC-UCLA story, and most of it, again, was just speculation.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about all this different stuff that was talked about and what actually happened since then.
Nothing.
Not a single thing.
No,
not
nothing.
A single freaking thing. Not even Oregon jumping to the Big Ten or anything. And so now it's going to happen as we're on the cusp of the season. I don't know about that. Could it happen during the course of the season? Sure, in theory it could. But what those moves are, I mean, I think we're still looking at pretty much the same things that were, the most obvious moves a week ago, 2 weeks ago, month ago. That's, the Pac-12 to, like, here's the thing. Here's the question I have is just what kind of contract are they going to sign? Like, that's all I need to know whether the Pac-12 is going to expand or whether the Big Ten's taking teams or whatever, is if they, announce some grant of rights agreement with Oregon and Washington and Stanford and, and even just leave it at that. And they say, hey, this is a 9-year contract. Okay, well, let's just put all those rumors to the side. Nothing's happening there. But, until that happens, there's just going to be more speculation. It's like the Big Ten deal. How many teams are the Big Ten going to pick off before they finally announce that deal, right? They were going to grab everybody before that deal was announced. And then they announced it, and now it's just kind of calmed down. So, I just think it's more of kind of the same type of speculation. The one part I just don't understand at all, and I agree, San Diego State's a hot team, not a very good story in the news this week, but, that comes with the territory. Same thing with, BYU and the Big 12. Bad timing on the bad PR, I think, for those schools, but I understand the appeal of San Diego State. For both conferences, I understand the appeal of SMU somewhat for the Pac-12. I don't think they quite I get it, and it's because, your Big 12 guy that you talked to back in the day when the moves were actually happening with the new 4 schools, and they were looking about, a second round of realignment, or at least, picking the brains of other schools. SMU was one of those, and it wasn't because of so much who they are right now, but what they could be. So if the Pac-12 is operating from that standpoint, I get SMU, but if they're acting like that's going to come in and be a savior for them early on, it's just not. They don't have Dallas. They don't. And I'm tired of seeing that they do. I understand that technically They are in Dallas, but they are not bringing 2.9 million or whatever that case may be. But for the Pac, as far as a move to stabilize everything, I think that's as about as good as you could expect to do as far as expanding. But the part ultimately I don't get is why anybody in their right mind thinks a Big 12 team would join the Pac-12. I just still don't understand that. I understand wishful thinking on the part of whoever that unnamed AD is. I understand that's one person saying that, and it's not, smoke that, oh my God, Oklahoma State's leaving. There's nothing to it other than that one unnamed person's quote. And so I'm not putting a lot of stock into that. I'm just curious as how we've dragged this whole Big 12 move into the Pac-12 thing through like the last couple of weeks when there's just absolutely no sign whatsoever of why that makes any sense in the world.
No, it doesn't, because
none.
But there is kind of almost a turf war at times on some of these stories. And we brought up John, and there's some things that he's written that I haven't really agreed with at all, and opinions from
It's not just
others.
him, though. I've seen people on Twitter saying that, like, hey, what do you think the chances are of this team? And I'm just like, what?
No, that's just fan bases and even sometimes other media members. But he did put this in there. Here's the deal with the Big 12. If Texas and Oklahoma haven't left yet because of the exit or whatever you want to call the fees of leaving, then you're damn sure not going to see anyone else do it. Also, the conference bylaws, he threw this in there, and it's a great point, but it's one that, if you really think about it, is just not going to happen. The conference bylaws allow for the Big 12 to be dissolved with only 8 votes. There's only 10 teams. Texas and Oklahoma are already there. Let's say they voted yes. You need 6 more. Is it going to be Oklahoma State, Baylor, Tech, TCU, Kansas, and Kansas State?
Nope.
Is Iowa State a part of this mix? West Virginia? They're going to go 3 time zones the opposite way. So, and he also does say, and fair to John, I don't think this is going to happen, in part because I don't believe ESPN wants to further disrupt the teetering ecosystem. But then he threw the zinger in, and because I don't think the Pac-12 would necessarily want all of those schools. But those schools, probably there may be a handful that would listen if the Pac-12 does get or has something really good to offer with their next TV deal, and no one's really expecting that to happen above what the Big 12 is going to get.
I mean, I think that would be a lot more effective, Barb, if, in fact, 2 brands besides the 2 that have left had left by now. But the Pac-12 is sitting in the exact same spot as the Big 12. The exact same spot, with maybe a couple of higher-profile brands, but they're still in the same spot. I've been hearing the predictions about them going to the Big 10 for 2 months now, and not a single thing has occurred. They're still in the exact same spot. So, maybe that comes out of nowhere tomorrow. Maybe that happens in the middle of the season. We've had plenty of people on who feel like, something could pop at any moment. But, I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a cheap shot given the fact that they lost their 2 biggest brands. The Big 12 lost their 2 biggest brands, and you're right. The Big 10's not knocking on the door of a bunch of Big 12 schools, but apparently they're not really knocking on the door of the Pac-12 as much as you would have made out to think, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm sure that's still ongoing, but to what extent remains to be seen. And until they leave, I think that, it's just maybe wishful thinking in some cases, and maybe just speculation that leads nowhere. But that is the one thing that the Big Ten has created, is this completely uncertain time period where you don't really know what to think or who is going where or what to believe, as far as, even the neighbor next to you. So that circles me back to, again, what kind of a TV deal is the Pac-12 going to get with this type of situation? Because, they might have more teams that are poachable. Okay, fine. The Big 12 doesn't have big brands. I think we recognize that. Oh, the Midwest is dumb, and so is the South, and like all that Western elite bullcrap that I hear constantly when it comes to the Big 12. I get all that, but you're in the exact same spot. So, it's not like it's the greatest brag in the world of, well, you're only stable because nobody wants you. But you're in the exact same situation right now, and you're even less stable because you don't even know if those teams that are with you right now want you either. So it's pretty much the same thing. I just think we're kind of going in circles with the whole Big 12 versus Pac-12 thing at this point.
A question in the chat room here from Chris Bartels. Why doesn't anybody, namely Big 12 and Pac-12, go after Notre Dame and build a TV contract around that?
Read that slower. I couldn't hear you.
Why doesn't anybody, namely the Big 12 and the Pac-12, go after Notre Dame and build a TV contract around that? I know it's about the money, but the money will increase dramatically with that brand. Notre Dame doesn't want to. That's why.
You're going to
Notre
call.
Dame doesn't want to
and
be
it's
anywhere
gonna
but
ring.
with Notre
Yeah.
Dame.
You ever had somebody call you don't want to answer the phone because they're annoying, or perhaps you don't know the number, or you just don't want to talk to them? And that's what